Very good. Thank you. Thank you for being here. Welcome. We also want to say thank you to everybody watching across the state of Minnesota online. We appreciate it. My name is Bruce Gordon. I'm the Director of Communications with the Department of Public Safety. Well, the alcohol industry is thriving around the state of Minnesota. Lots of Minnesota-produced craft beers and wines. Well, we're here today to talk about that not all alcoholic beverages are equal, especially when we're talking about alcohol content. Knowing how much alcohol is in a beverage could truly make the difference between life and death. We have a number of speakers that are joining us here today. First of all, Special Agent Terry Kelly with our Alcohol and Gambling Enforcement Division. Special Agent Kelly will talk about the different types of drinks, how much you're actually consuming, why it's so important to educate yourself about ABVs, that's alcohol by volume. Chief Matt Clark with the University of Minnesota Police Department. Chief Clark will discuss their freshman education efforts surrounding alcohol, the campus escort service to help students arrive home safely, and the efforts to get students of age to drink responsibly. Joe Berg, who is the general manager here at the library, he'll discuss the establishment's efforts to make sure their servers are well educated on the overservice issue and underage drinking issue. Also in attendance here today, Lieutenant Tiffany Schweigert with the Minnesota State Patrol. She'll be available to answer any traffic safety questions that you might have. Justin Yarrington, who is the director of the Security Monitor Program, the Escort Program here at the University of Minnesota. And we'd also like to recognize Joe Chesick for being in attendance as well. He was recently named the new director of the Minnesota Licensed Beverage Association, and we appreciate him being here with us as well. So we'll begin with Special Agent Terry Kelly.
Good morning. So regardless of whether you're an experienced drinker or not, it's easy to be overcome by the amount of alcohol that you've consumed and not realize how much that you've had. Anecdotally speaking, recently one of our alcohol investigators was speaking to his neighbor, and he told him a story about how he was somewhere having a couple of beers with his wife. He normally drinks about 2 beers at a time, but at this particular place he had a new craft beer he had never had before. After having a second one, he got up to leave and realized that he felt much more impaired than he normally would after 2 beers. Thankfully, he made the smart decision and handed his keys to his wife and had her drive home. When he got home, he did some research and found out that the beer he was drinking had a much higher alcohol content than the beer that he's used to drinking, and realized that he also had larger glasses than he normally has, and realized that when you go out and consume these things, you have to be mindful about what it is that you're actually consuming, because not everything's equal. So next to me, you're going to notice 4 different drinks here. When we talk about what a drink is, when you say how many drinks you've had, typically you're referring to a 12-ounce, commercially produced beer that's got about a 4 or 5% alcohol content. You're talking about a 5-ounce glass of wine, or you're talking about a mixed drink with the equivalent of 1 shot of alcohol in it. So many of the craft beers that are popular today actually have a much higher alcohol content than that, and many of the drinks that are popular with people today actually have much more alcohol than just the 1 shot equivalent to it. So over here you'll see 4 different drinks. The first is your commercially produced beer, which has that lower alcohol content. The second one is a typical craft beer representative of many of the great ones we have here in Minnesota with a much higher alcohol content to it. Next to that, you're going to see a margarita, and next to that is a Long Island iced tea. Now this commercially produced beer right here is about 1 drink. The one next to it, the craft beer with a higher alcohol content, is more equivalent to almost 2 drinks, just short of 2 drinks based on the amount of alcohol that's in it. That margarita there is also equivalent to almost 2 drinks, the amount of alcohol that's in it. And then the one on the end, the Long Island iced tea, depending on where you get it, they vary from being 2 to 4 drinks a piece because they have so much alcohol content in them. Now your average person having a couple of Long Island iced teas has now consumed anywhere from 4 to 8 drinks just thinking that they actually had 2. So we want people to be aware that that's the amount of alcohol that they're actually consuming when they're out there drinking. And according to the Centers for Disease Control, here in Minnesota, we lose about 73 people every year to alcohol poisoning, which makes us one of the highest in the country. That's what makes us passionate about this topic, is we want people to be aware and we want to prevent those loss of life. We encourage people to educate themselves on the ABVs, which, as Bruce said, is the alcohol by volume of what it is they're drinking. Monitor the friends when they're drinking, and encourage them to stop when they're feeling impaired. And I say impaired rather than intoxicated because we want you to stop prior to being intoxicated. Okay? We also encourage establishments to educate their servers on overservice and underage drinking and underage access to alcohol. We fully support the efforts of educating the students as well as all of these servers that serve alcohol here on the campus of the University of Minnesota Police, the University of Minnesota, and we support the police department here at the U on their efforts as well. And at this time, I'd like to bring up Chief Matt Clark from the University of Minnesota Police Department.
Good morning, I'm Matt Clark, Chief of Police at the University of Minnesota. I'd like to send my thanks to the Department of Public Safety for bringing this important safety information and initiative forward, and their invitation to be a part of this educational process. At the University of Minnesota, we're committed to learning and research. Our staff and our faculty are dedicated to delivering a world-class education, and we have some of the best and brightest students in the nation. As you know, though, universities across the country face issues involving alcohol abuse. This is why the University of Minnesota and the University of Minnesota Police Department are specifically focused on awareness for our students. This initiative helps keep our students safe and informed. At the university, members of the police department walked on foot and had essentially foot beats the first week of school. They passed out this flyer. It's called Abusive Drinking, What You Should Know. And this is part of a multi-pronged effort to help students and young adults understand the risks and the science behind use and abuse of alcohol. Today's Department of Public Safety program complements our work on campus. Other areas of focus involving alcohol for the University of Minnesota Police Department are 1, 911 amnesty. Students can call 911 when friends need medical help because they have used alcohol. Their friends and those callers will not be cited for minor consumption. The safety of our students are our greatest priority. Be safe and avoid injury. Overconsumption of alcohol can result in a higher likelihood of physical injury. We've seen examples from a simple fall to severe injuries. We're trying to educate our students to make sure that they use alcohol appropriately. Enforcement. The University of Minnesota Police Department launched Last Call this fall. Operation Last Call involves citing students at the beginning of school for minor consumption and possession. Our focus is always education and safety, but issuing citations is part of our toolbox to reduce alcohol abuse. Also, remember, students, you are able to avoid becoming a victim and able to escape incidents when you're not impaired. This goes hand in hand with our last focus, which is arrive safely. Use our campus escort and transportation services. Specifically, call 624-WALK for an escort or use the Gopher chauffeur. Again, thanks to the Department of Public Safety for bringing this important alcohol-related topic forward and assisting the university with important safety and educational tips. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Joe Berg, and I'm the General Manager of the Library Bar. We opened back in 2005, and for 9 years we have had 0 alcohol-related violations. And we attribute those things from education. It's educating the staff, educating the managers, and we do that through an outside consulting agency that we bring in once a year, led by Laura Boyd, called the Alcohol Compliance Services. We keep our customers safe, students, anybody who comes to our establishment also by, I don't know if you can see behind me, but we have a slideshow going on. We run this at night, and it lets people know not only to be courteous to the people while you're leaving our establishment, but also that we will call you a cab. If you so need that, any one of our staff members will call one of those for you. We let them know also that the University of Minnesota does offer the Walk Safe plan and the Gopher chauffeur as well. Our top priority is really keeping our customers safe and bringing them back in, wanting to come back to our establishment. Thank you very much.
At this time, we have opportunity for questions for any of our speakers here today.
Joe, can I ask you real quick to come back up and just talk briefly just about the craft beer explosion. I mean, it's really taken off in this town. I mean, so we've seen more of it, more demand for it, and are you seeing this same thing, like more alcohol content in it?
Yes, absolutely. And one of the points that I try to make as running a business on campus, I like to bring in beer that, in the beer industry, they call it sessionable beer. So if you were to sit down, like a lot of our customers do, and have more than one, then you can, and not have the very, very high alcohol content. A lot of them have the ABV of 8, 9, 10, where you go out and find them somewhere else. I don't like to bring in those kind of beers, and I won't. I like to keep them sessionable, is what they call it.
Any other questions? Yes, sir.
Is there a law that says you have to have ABV listed on the menu, or is it not?
There's no law that says you have to.
But you find it on
You can certainly Google and find most of your manufacturers put it on their websites what their different beers are. So it's very easy to find.
I think most people don't really know that a craft beer has more alcohol in it than a regular beer.
Correct. And not only that, but if you think about a 12-ounce beer and a bottle of beer, typically your pours at a bar are 16, 20-ounce pours, sometimes even larger when people are ordering tall beers. And so you equate a number to the alcohol content and volume, when in reality, again, with a higher alcohol content and more quantity, just that much more likely that you're consuming more than you think you are. And that's the awareness we want people to have.
Can you talk just a little bit about when people might start feeling impaired versus getting into that danger category? I mean, we've had the cases, where people are frozen to death outside.
Correct.
And the student up in Duluth.
When you start to feel the effects of what you're consuming, I guess is the only way I can really put it, because it's different for everybody, but when you start to feel those loosening inhibitions, a little bit of weariness in your movements, when you get up from your bar stool and you can tell that you've been drinking, that's the point where you're now impaired. And impairment, again, is different than intoxication. In my mind, intoxication is when you're, the cartoonish falling down drunk. And we don't want anyone to get to that point, whether you're driving or whether you're walking, because as we've all stated, walking down the street being intoxicated, you can be injured, you can be severely hurt, you can be hit by a car, you can fall and hurt yourself. There's just as much likelihood of injury that way as there is with getting in a car or being a passenger in a car where somebody's been drinking and driving.
Chief, can you talk about some of the instances that you've seen here on campus, especially with younger students?
Sure. We've had incidents where students have injured themselves at different times because of their impairment and intoxication levels. Of course, we're always supporting you having a friend with you if you're going to go out at night and use alcohol. We always want you to take an escort with you, but we also have services as well. We've seen incidents from a minor fall where we have our officers arriving to that, to some severe injuries as well.
It's probably possible to get alcohol poisoning from craft beer, but you need to drink quite a bit of that.
That's correct. I mean, you can get alcohol poisoning if you consume a large amount of alcohol, depending on that level. We've seen that as well. What's important to us, again, is that we know that students are going to use alcohol to a certain extent. We know that they're just learning as young adults how to use it and what their limitations are. And as Terry said, that there are times where it's a feeling more than anything. And so trying to educate them with the amount of alcohol and being clear on what you're actually consuming is important. Some of the sugary drinks that we get that are mixed with alcohol, I think students would misinterpret that as more of a sports drink or kind of a Kool-Aid type drink than actually an alcoholic beverage.
Are you seeing any change in the number of citations for minors who drink on campus here?
Well, with Operation Last Call, what we got from our students was that they actually realized, because we advertised it across the campus, that we were going to be out. We had undercover officers as well as uniformed officers watching for people that were walking around with beverages. And we actually heard from students that they listened to that, and so we saw a dip of about 40% in our citations that we issued within that first week of Operation Last Call. Yes.
And what does the citation cost for a minor?
I don't have the exact amount, so yeah, that's a good question. I can get it for you.
This Operation Last Call, is that new this year, or have you done it every school year?
We've done something similar to that on the school years. The big thing is, again, awareness at the same time providing incentive through enforcement.
Can you talk about
Yep, it's a great question. So if you call 911 and your friend is experiencing a level of intoxication that needs medical assistance, you and your friend will not receive a citation for that. That's a state law, that's an amnesty law, and we'll make sure that we follow that. Our biggest priority is the safety of students. Secondarily, though, if we do respond to a medical situation, and that might be that somebody calls about you, a neighbor somewhere that lives in the area, in the neighborhood, or somebody on campus calls and you're highly intoxicated, if you need medical assistance, we'll make sure we get that for you, but you will be issued a citation for minor consumption.
This might be a question for anybody here, but for so long it's always been kind of beer, the hard alcohol, wine, now with craft beer, not just here in Minnesota, but it doesn't add kind of a whole new aspect to everything. Now you kind of have that in-between alcohol content that's more than beer, less than wine.
You know, I think that with the proliferation of the craft beer, and we're certainly not in any way trying to knock craft beer in any way, shape, or form. In fact, I enjoy it myself. The thing about it is that I don't think people realize that it has a higher alcohol content. Most of them do. And I don't think they make that equation in their mind. And so that's what we're trying to get them to be aware of. You could have gotten intoxicated on anything as long as time there's been alcohol around. And if you use too much of it, you're going to get intoxicated and you're going to have problems. But there, like you said, there's kind of that in between now. The craft wines even too as well. People now are doing things differently than they used to. There used to be kind of a standard. Beer is this percentage of alcohol. Now there's that range. Some are 4, some are 10. And so there's a vast difference between those two. And that is where some people experience a problem because they don't realize how much faster they're going to feel those signs of impairment. Exactly, and that's exactly our message, is that 2 beers is not necessarily 2 beers depending on what you're drinking, especially when it comes to quantity and size and alcohol content. We want people to be aware that, like I said, your typical craft beer, this one sitting in front of me, equates to almost 2 of this one right here next to it, but they look very similar.